video, I want to talk about the history command. We're going to talk a little bit about control point curves and some other features. We'll talk about rotating a little bit and why the history command is really helpful when you're creating rotations and complex surfaces to be able to maintain the editability of that surface that you've created. So a really common thing to want to do in Rhino is to make a curve and then rotate it around to quickly create really interesting solids. So what I'm going to do is go to the curve menu, freeform, and I'm going to choose a control point curve. And I'm going to work in the top view here for a second. And let's see, I'm going to turn some snapping off here. All right, so I do actually want actually we'll just hit 0 to start the curve at the origin. And then I'll keep all the other snaps off here. And I'm just going to click down and create some curvature here. These control point curves are pretty awesome. Okay. But then I'm going to go ahead and turn these things back on, and I want to make sure it's intersecting. Okay. So I'm going to go down to this point, and it says, is that what you want? And I said, well, I want it to be on that perpendicular. So I'm using Smart Track here. We could just go to this point and it's going to say, oh, you want to make a closed shape, which can be rotated. We can do some cool stuff. But I'm just going to go ahead and go, okay, I want it on that point. I'm going to hold Shift. This is going to stay perpendicular. Oh. And I'm going to hit Return and be done with my shape. So now this thing can be rotated around an axis pretty easily. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it first with the history off, and then second with the history on so you can see the difference. So I'm going to go here to Transform and look for Rotate. I'm going to choose that curve to rotate, hit Return. It wants my center of rotation, which is going to be start at the origin, hit Return. And then I actually want to rotate around this axis right here. So we'll choose, I'm going to turn grid snap back on, and really just need to make sure that I'm perpendicular in the right direction. And then it's asking the question, how far do you want to go? I'm just going to go ahead and hit Return. All right, I screwed that up. Let me try that again. Rotate. I don't want the rotate command. That's not the command that I want. What I want is, I think it's a surface tool. Revolve. That's what I want. All right. So I'm going to revolve that curve. Hit Return. And then I'm going to draw the axis. I want it to go from here. Let's see. We're going to rotate it around this one, right? Okay. Start angle. I don't really care. I think 0 is fine. And then how far to go? I want to go a full circle. And there it is. So let me turn this on to solid here real quick, or shaded view, so you can see. That's a really interesting shape we were able to create very, very quickly. Now, my history was off. So if I were to go in and actually start editing the curve here, so I'm going to choose the curve, and then I want to turn control points on. Let's see. Control points on. I don't remember how to do that. I think there's a command, but I know on my keyboard if I hold the function key and hit F10, it turns on my control points. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take this and move it around. Change the shape of the curve a little bit. I can go click and drag on a few of these. I can highlight a couple of those and move multiple control points at once. And notice all it's doing is just deforming the curve, the original curve, but not the actual surface. If we go backwards, I'm going to undo some of these changes, and I'm going to undo the revolve. If before we revolve this thing, I'm going to turn those control points off for a second. So you do that by holding function F11. Before I revolve this thing, if I turn history on, something really cool happens. So we're going to go back and revolve. I want that curve, and I want, hit Return, I want my axis to be the green axis, and hit 0 and 0 for my 360. Okay, so it creates that same shape, which is awesome. But now, if I go back to my curve and I hit function F10 to turn on control points, and I start moving some stuff, select a couple control points. So that one I'll hold shift and select a couple, and I start moving. Notice it's actually live updating the shape. So actually we'd like this to kind of come down in this direction. Okay, so history is huge for us. That point is a little too pointy for me, so I'm gonna take that curve point and I'm gonna move it down. See if I can kind of take some of that curve out. There's now actually even a little dimple in there. That's kind of cool. I can move this around. Notice it's only selecting that curve. It's not selecting the surface, but the curve is being redrawn around that surface. So history is really important for us as we're trying to make some changes. I want to widen that thing out, kind of stretch in both directions a little bit, and kind of move it back. And then let's move this point up. I think I just want it to kind of come to a flat point right there. I like that. I'm going to turn grid snap off and just kind of shift this thing up a little bit so it feels flatter, kind of to a peak here. Good. So I've really drastically changed that shape by just changing the curve and that just moving some control points on the curve as long as I have history turned on. So what this does is it actually feels a lot more like sculpting and creating surfaces. So you can create some pretty complex surfaces pretty easily. Just remember to turn your history command on.